So today I want to talk about cancer. I want to talk about darkness and what we don't know about these things. Let's face it. Let's meet the darkness head on today. I'm Rebeccah Silence here with Theresa Vee, world-renowned angelic guide, spiritual mentor, and teacher to just face the dark a little bit. Theresa, what is cancer? Why the dark?
So it's interesting because I don't necessarily view cancer as darkness. So
Very interesting.
it is. And I know exactly where that question is coming from. And having been through someone who has brought through, having been someone who has brought through so much darkness as a result of having an experience with cancer, I get that. What's important is we have these aspects of ourselves, like there's the spirit and then there's our expression on this planet, which is generally run by our ego. And in spirituality, we think of the ego as negative and we think of it as bad, but the ego's purpose is just to keep us alive, really. Because if we only functioned as believing we were this perfect spirit and we knew our home was truly like out there in heaven or wherever we believe it is, we would be jumping off cliffs, right? The ego is like, it keeps us alive by telling us what's safe and what's not. But the ego believes that we have separated from the divine, that we are separated from our soul. And so this creates this push pull between spirit and ego. And that push pull, that belief in separation, makes us live in a world of illusion a lot of times and identify with this world of illusion. And so there's a lot of layers of this, but what I find in my work as a wellness professional is that often the one that's the most profound for us is emotion and emotional health. Like the experiences that we have here on this planet, in this body, with interacting with other beings like us, the emotions that come from that, and how we process them or don't process them. That's the biggest catalyst I find for dis-ease in our systems.
And then is cancer, you're saying you don't see it as darkness, but is it disease?
So cancer creates dis-ease in our bodies. Definitely. It disrupts patterns. There's a lot about cancer that's really incredible. The one root, if we look at the emotional root of cancer, we can almost always trace it back to an unexpressed emotion of anger. Like that's the root. And that doesn't mean that that's the only thing, right? With cancer, we can all be exposed to the same stimulus and only some people develop cancer. We're all exposed to the sun, but not everybody develops skin cancer. So what is the difference? There's genetic differences, physiological differences, biological, behavioral, all of the things. But our emotional health is also one of these key components. And when we look at cancer as a living, breathing cell, what cancer seeks to do is replicate itself over and over again and survive. Like it's dedicated to the survival of the organism, not realizing that it's killing the organism that it's surviving in. It actually, there's some interaction here where it thinks it's helping. And at some level, cancer is our system trying to evolve, right? It's like trying to counter some stimulus that is negative in some way. So what we need to start doing is changing the communication with the cancer once it exists. But for the answer to your question is that what happens to us is we become so much a part of this experience that we have these emotions, we have these things that happen to us, and our identification with them creates discomfort and disease in our experience. And I always say dis-ease instead of disease because
Mhm.
that's got so many connotations that are negative. Dis-ease just means I'm not at ease in this system, and how can I fix this?
Yeah, and as a cancer survivor, it's It's just such a confronting, sometimes confusing, but also liberating experience that I've been through. And I personally don't believe that people cause their cancer or heal their cancer. I think the cancer is like a train that we didn't create and we can't stop, but we do have, if you're someone that is experiencing cancer or has experienced cancer, we do have choice and control around who we become and the healing that we commit to emotionally and physically in the face of that experience. Any thoughts on that?
I completely agree with you on that. Um, there's one other piece of that I want to address, but it's our best shot at changing our system from a place of dis-ease to a place where we're existing more comfortably is to realign with that perfection of ourselves. And knowing you and knowing your healing journey and what you've shared about it, that's exactly what I saw you doing when you were sharing about it is, I'm choosing to realign myself with this state of perfection, and I'm moving myself closer to that. And so when we start remembering who we are at the soul level and the perfection that is within us, we can move closer to that. And I also want to say, in the spirit of compassion and of non-judgment, that's not always possible, right? There are some times where we agree at the soul level to go through any experience that we need to in order to learn our soul lessons. And sometimes healing is always possible at some level. Healing is always possible, but that doesn't mean that we won't pass away of some dis-ease we are experiencing. But the healing might have happened at the emotional level or the spiritual level. So
I love
healing
that
is
you're
always
bringing that
possible.
up. Yeah, because it is about, at least for me, getting to the place where life doesn't need to be different than it is.
Right.
And I
Acceptance.
can be aligned and experiencing me and freedom and possibility regardless of circumstance. To me, that's what I would define the perfection that you're speaking about
Yeah.
as, like getting to this place that I do believe exists and is possible where I can be with the moment as it is.
Hmm.
To me, healing means it doesn't hurt anymore. That's it.
So true. The key that I wanted to bring in also, because the how you and I started this conversation was, God didn't create cancer.
Yeah, I'm glad you're bringing this up.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And like, okay, well then what? What? So that's sort of the separation we're talking about. Like God is love, right? That's God creates everything, yet nothing is separate and apart from God. However, we're experiencing things on this planet like cancer and poverty and, racial injustice and all of the things. So one of my favorite ways to frame that is to look at what the Dalai Lama has said about it and stop praying for God to fix problems you created. And that's exactly the same thing with cancer. It's not that you can't pray for healing and you can't pray for guidance. That's absolutely true. But part of what we're looking at with cancer is it's a response to environmental problems we've created. It's a response to emotional problems we've created. It's our body's response to, food we're ingesting that is not healthy for us. Or it may also just be our response to a stimulus that is calling us to our next level. It's calling us to transition out of this world. We don't know always why we're here in the whole scope of things. So we need to remember to bring in the compassion for ourselves. But for the most part, God doesn't point its finger at us and say, you have to suffer, and this is how you're going to suffer. That's not the way. And so many of us, when we experience dis-ease, move into that place of why me? Why me? Like, why is God punishing me? And it's not a punishment. It's just what you're strong enough to go through this experience. And whatever that means, Carolyn Mace always taught, and she said, well, why not you? When you question why me? I've been in session with her, and someone has said, why me? And she says, why not you? So that's the important thing too, is just to realize that there are things that we've created here that are not in alignment with illusion, that are, I'm sorry, that are more in alignment with illusion than are in alignment with perfection. And those are the things that we're seeking to change. And that's when dis-ease and sickness happens in our systems.
Yeah, and where this conversation stemmed from was Theresa and I discussing A Course in Miracles. And there are a couple of lessons in A Course in Miracles, one being nothing real can be threatened, another being that God doesn't create anything that isn't real. And as a cancer survivor that got diagnosed with cancer while I was pregnant, I have a really hard time navigating the possibility that cancer isn't real because it's so real in my life, in my experience. There's a very real possibility that cancer can come back in my lifetime. And so Theresa and I were just starting to have this conversation, and I still am adamantly wanting to hold on to the belief that nobody created the cancer that they had. And then we do create the experience we have if there's cancer in our system. And then I agree with you, the why not me? That's something that I've also held on to. I would not have wanted anybody else to be the one carrying it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm grateful it was me if it was going to be somebody. And then I have spent my life ever since getting diagnosed with cancer 6 years ago. Right now, at the time of this filming, it's 2021. I got diagnosed with cancer while I was 7 months pregnant in 2014. And the thing about it is there was so much emotional cancer. There was so much physical cancer. There was so much mental cancer that I did have control over healing and really being with, facing, moving through, and conquering in the midst of there actually being live cancer cells in my body. And then today I'm fully in remission, having defied many statistical odds that I was told I wouldn't be able to defy. And I just think, we don't cause it, we don't heal it, but we do create an experience of healing that is ours to take on. And what if we don't need a crisis or global tragedy or a cancer diagnosis to start to face the cancer that we are inviting in and living with every day? That's what I want people to chew on because of this conversation. Theresa, are you still with us? She's frozen, but everyone watching, think about the power you have to deal with the cancer in your life now without there needing to be a bigger diagnosis. And she's back.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. All of a sudden you were frozen and that was it. So yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And the piece the piece around cancer not being real, the Course in Miracles separates the soul and the ego and the belief in separation, right? So cancer isn't real because it's not part of the perfection of your soul. That's all the real stuff, is the perfection of your soul. It's here in the identification with the ego and with our experience on this 3D planet. That's why they're saying it's not real. It's part of this illusion. However, your experience here on this world, in this world, is making it a very real experience because you're going through it on all the levels, right? And so when people sometimes, when they follow things like this, will just be like, oh, well, they're saying I have cancer, but it's not real because Course in Miracles says it's not real. And that's when you don't study something fully, when you just kind
Yeah.
of go off, take half a lesson and move forward. So I'm not going to do anything about it because it's not real. But your expression here is very real to you now. And so how can you, using everything available to you, get your expression here to be closer to the perfection of the expression of your soul? And sometimes that involves surgery or chemo or
Mhm.
healing circles or prayer. That's It's what was it for you? And I think that's the thing, not denying the reality of somebody's experiences, being in the compassion of how real this experience is. It's crippling, a lot of times. It stops your life. So how can we be there with somebody and still be encouraging them to take every step they can to realign with the perfection of their soul, physically, mentally, spiritually, all of it,
I love it. And emotionally. And for
and
me,
emotionally.
what I'm getting from this conversation that's actually really healing for me is cancer is not more real than a soul, than a
Right.
spirit. That soul, that spirit, that is the essence, that is all there is. And in our lifetime, we have, I believe, the power and the capacity to connect to who we are on that soul level. And what if that's the job in this lifetime, to connect to who you are on a soul level, regardless of circumstances, so that you can see and connect to the soul in front of you, regardless of how they're showing up. And that is a dream that I have, is a vision where humanity is so healed that they can see the greatness and speak to the greatness in everyone they meet. And I love that, Theresa. That's a huge gift you're giving me just talking this out today, is seeing, okay, what is real is who we actually are. And everything else is just more access, including cancer, to who we really are. And who we really are is a collective. We aren't separate. We aren't alone, no matter how real it feels that we're alone or that we're separate. We're just not.
So true. I think to what you're speaking about in terms of there's like an identification that happens for a lot of us with dis-ease also. And so at the soul level, this isn't the thing, right? We're having this experience here in this body, but our soul is perfect. Our soul is always in its perfect state. What we start to do when we have any kind of discomfort or disease, like allergies, my allergies, blah, blah, blah. So now what we're doing is we are saying my allergies, we're owning them, we're adopting them, we're cementing them in as part of our experience instead of approaching it like allergies are present in my experience at this moment. We bring them in, we adopt them, my allergies, we own them, we own that. And that's when the allergies are serving us in some way. They're getting us attention. They're getting us out of something we don't want to do, whatever it is. This is the same with cancer or any discomfort or disease. My cancer versus I am having an experience with cancer.
I love that you're saying that. I think one of the things that helped me navigate the experience I was in with a diagnosis of cancer, with real cancer cells in my body, was I wouldn't identify as the cancer, with the cancer, or as dying. I identified as healed and as living. And I just decided whether that's what happens or not, I'm going to live like I'm going to live. And I threw the kitchen sink at cancer: Reiki, chiropractic, cranial sacral therapy, physical therapy, massage therapy, yoga therapy, acupuncture. Literally, I had a different practitioner working on me in my bed because I couldn't walk. I was in bed for 9 months, 12 surgeries, chemotherapy. I had different healing practitioners coming in to work on me, to work with me every day. And I remember my husband asking me, well, how are you going to know what's working? I was like, I don't care. Like, if I ever know what it is that works, I'm just committed to living through this and not identifying as I'm dying.
Mhm.
And I remember having to set a lot of boundaries with people I love very much. If you're going to talk to me like I'm dying, if you're going to look at me like I'm going to die, I can't be in your presence right now. And I think, again, what if it doesn't have to take such an extreme circumstance for you watching, for you listening to Theresa and I today to take charge of what works for you and your soul in this lifetime? It doesn't need to get worse for you to get your voice. It doesn't need to get worse for you to have some boundaries. It doesn't need to get worse for you to demand of yourself connecting to that highest, perfect version of you. Teresa. I'm so glad we're having this conversation. What else? What else do we want people to know about how powerful they are? You are
Yeah.
so much more powerful than any circumstance. That's my wish for you to take away from this today.
Everything that you have done in your life has prepared you for this moment, right? So all of the work that you've done before has prepared you to get through this, whatever it is. And that's, when we're at our best, it's so much easier to do our spiritual practices, our exercise, eat right. When the chips are down and things get hard, that's when it gets harder. But it's all of those times when it was easy that carry us through. And so, regardless of what it is that makes you feel good, brings you joy, gets you closer to that perfect expression of yourself, do it, because someday you might need those reserves of energy. You might need that push through. We all do. As humans, we go through really hard stuff all the time. And it's important for us to be able to support ourselves through it, because we can't always be supported by others the way we want to. Just like Rebeccah was saying, we need to have reserves in ourselves and then rely on the outside of us for whatever's left.
Will you say one more time what you just said about hard and easy?
I don't know what I just said.
Well, you were talking about, when it's
Oh,
easy,
yeah.
it prepares us for when it's hard. But I wanted you to just speak a little bit more.
So, it's easy when I'm in a good place, or when you're in a good place, it's much easier to eat right. It's much easier to remember to exercise. It's much easier to do your spiritual practice. When you're in a place where someone's died and suddenly you're in mourning, it gets much harder to have the energy to consistently do those things, to get up and do your spiritual practice, because you're navigating through grief. So at those times, all of the things that you did to prepare your energy reserves, that's the energy you're using to navigate through. So all of your spiritual practices, all of the things you did to make yourself as healthy as possible, push you through those times when it's hard. So that's why it's so important to have times where you're really focused on self-care when things are going well for you, because it's the times when things get hard that self-care carries you through.
Yeah. And what I would suggest that everyone consider is that it matters most that you commit to you showing up at the most inspired, highest level when it's hard. And if you can do it when it's easy, you can do it when it's hard. It doesn't need to be easy for you to show all the way up. It's
Mhm.
when it's hard that you get access to who you can be. And I think as adults, we get to choose to reinvent ourselves over and over again as many times as we want. I don't think we find ourselves. I think we choose who we're going to be, and we can use life in all of its seasons and in all of its experiences to choose who we're going to be. So, cancer's real, and then you're more real. The darkness is real, and so is the light. I'm Rebeccah Silence, talking today to Theresa Vee about darkness and hard stuff and what's possible anyway. Thank you, Theresa.
Thank you so much, Rebeccah.